there who, instead of being caught up in that, would rather lock the roads down and not let you get cameras in and not let you get the stories out, so that it doesn't look bad on their record when it comes down. They were allowing bodies to be washed out to sea because it's better to let that happen and then be missing persons instead of another body count on their local county or their area. By the time I was told that we needed to disarm, I had at least 40 people there armed. AKs, ARs, sidearms, and I started putting a plan together, and I'll just put it this way. I called Murdoch Piscotti, the president of my organization, on the last day, which I'm going to get to this in a minute, and I told him, I've been busted, and I got to tell you what I was doing, because it might come back on you, because you're the one sending me aid down here. But I was not just trying to put boats in the water. I was not just trying to bring supplies and aid in from other parts of Texas and across the country. What I was doing is I was using the old tactic that we see the government using and saying that we were doing humanitarian aid runs. But on those humanitarian aid runs of ships full of food and medical supplies, I was putting at least 4 to 5 armed men or women, team members in boats to get them over into the Golden and Vidor areas and the Port Arthur areas, so that we had armed militia in those areas to protect Texans and also help pull them out. The first night that I was there, we had at least one team that was not part of the militia. They were there, I think, as adjutants, and I personally heard them talking about hunting people. And there were people down there that were hunting people. They were not hunting deer, they were not hunting boar, they were not hunting pigs, they were hunting people. I think some of them believed that they were hunting looters, but as I said earlier, after a day or two of being in shit at the fan in a situation where there's no water, no food, your most moralistic person might go into your neighbor's house and try and find food and water for survival. So at this point in time, you have people who aren't necessarily looters, but people who are just trying to survive. And if they looked like looters, they were being shot. They were hunting people. Those bodies are not being recorded in the body counts that are happening down there. And now that FEMA and National Guard took over and suspended all rescue operations, people are, they're bringing in prison ships. And I'm going to tell you right now, do not get on their fucking prison ships, because you might not come back. They're allowing the sharks and the fish to eat the bodies that go out to sea, just like they did in Hurricane Katrina. And with millions of people being displaced from their homes and their neighborhoods, you might go missing forever, and they think that you just bugged out and went somewhere else in the country and can't find you. But a lot of these people are going out to sea and never coming back. By the next morning, I had trucks and militia rolling in. So now we're going into the 4th or 5th day that I was down there. I was only sleeping about an hour a night, just enough to, not be in sleep deprivation and being able to keep my mind sane. And by the afternoon, I had probably about 75 armed men and women, not including the ones that were already out in the water doing rescues, and was continuing to make the call for supplies. By that night, I had 100 to 150 very tacked out armed teams ready to protect Texans. Ready to go into these small towns and these neighborhoods and make sure that people were not getting locked in, make sure they were getting aid coming into them, and making sure that the government was not allowing people to be killed, whether it was by the release of these dams and the flooding for a second time, not from the hurricane, but they were flooding these areas for a second time. And my security guy informed me that what they were doing was basically flushing the toilet on Port Arthur, and the bodies that they had seen from the hurricane, whether they were full of bullet holes or whether they were just flood victims, were not there during the second flooding. They had not been collected, they were being washed out to sea. So we had about $50,000 to $100,000 worth of supplies show up in the form of medical supplies, food, water, and all these different things. 100 to 150 very tacked out, very capable armed militiamen. And these, like I said, these are not the people that you see bullshitting on the internet. These are actual 3%ers that showed up and were about it and ready to go. About 3 o'clock in the morning on the last night that I was there, private contractors showed up, and they were very angry about some of the things that were going on. They demanded that I hand over those supplies and that I disperse my men and women that were there for the safety of Texans. And I refused. And I told him very strictly to his face that you're not going to tell me to disarm. I've been a part of the open carry movement. I was PR director of a very large organization, and if he was going to threaten me in that manner, I would make a very quick phone call and make sure that 1,000 armed people showed up and were ready to continue the job that we were doing. On Facebook and social media, I was talking about supplies and helping out people, but the very reality of the fact was I was using those boats and I was using those people and those supplies to make sure that armed militia were going in, and I believe wholeheartedly that we stopped a gun confiscation, and we stopped them from murdering a lot of people. Because that was happening down there. I think it's still happening down there. Some of the homeless people were freaked out. Thomas Jefferson High School in Port Arthur had a lot of people evacuated by plane, and there was at least 1,500 that were left behind that refused to get on the FEMA planes because they said that they were not making their destinations. They were not showing up in certain areas. And those people, I don't know where they were going. The 1,500 that were there, we sent a security force over to because they almost started rioting at the Thomas Jefferson High School in Port Arthur because of the way they were being treated. And again, I'm going to tell people, we've talked about this for years. For fucking years, we talked about this. Don't go to the FEMA centers. This shit's very real. I just experienced it firsthand, and I've come home to decompress over these issues to the Ozarks while I'm still in connection with things that are going on down there. The private contractors came in, tried to disarm us, tried to take over our supplies, and I wasn't having any of it. The guy that was working with me hand in hand started carrying around an ice pick because the contractor had threatened his life, and he was ready to stab this guy in his neck because he straight up threatened our lives. I had my .357 on my hip the whole time that I was there, and this contractor was talking to us about open carrying and scaring people, but the real reality is they were trying to control the situation and take over, for whatever reason, supplies and get those armed men out of there. And he tried to take my .357 off my hip, in which case my retention skills that I've done, whether the open carry movement or my training in other areas I'm not going to talk about, I put my elbow directly on my gun. As soon as he tried to grab it, smacked his arm away and had to inform him I was going to shoot him in his head if he tried to touch my gun again, because they were trying to take over and threaten our operation of protecting Texans so that they could get away with whatever they were getting away with, hiding bodies, covering up things that were going on. Some of the neighborhoods that those guys were going into were the richest neighborhoods and were involved in, I believe, government looting or private contractor looting. So we slept in the back corner of the pastor's office that night, and the next morning we had already had everything set up, and we got up and we sent everybody out in 8 to 10 different directions where they couldn't be followed, and they went to their respective places, to these small towns in these areas, and we got the supplies there. We got the armed militia into these areas to protect Texans, and they continued that as I left town and went back to Dallas. My mission at that point in time, after 5 days, was basically over, and I left and got out of the areas. We had been flooded in, and the flood waters had started to recede after about 48 hours. That stuff's still going on down there. FEMA came in, the government came in, and they locked down the areas. And they're now bringing in prison ships, which one of the judges down there in that local area has now ruled and put his foot down to get them out of the Port Arthur area. And that's happening today. So I'm still in contact with people down there and things that are going on and aid missions that are happening, even though I'm just doing it by my electronic communications at this point in time, which I'm sure I'm monitored constantly for the stuff that we do. I've been told by Dallas detectives and others that our pictures hang on the wall there as individuals who are activists and people basically not to mess with, because we'll bring 1,000 armed people to your area if you threaten us or try to do these gun confiscations, and that's just how it is. But we're not playing anymore. This isn't going to be Katrina. This isn't going to be a place where you have martial law and you're murdering people, if many of us have anything to do with it. So it's a very serious situation, and the reason that the Texas coast was not Katrina was because there were Texans there who gave a shit and put their lives on the line to save people. It was a war zone down there, and it was bad, and it still is bad. And these agencies are still trying to go in there and put their foot in the door and keep control of things, but they're fucking killing people. The body count is way higher than what it ever is being said. The propaganda they're spouting on TV about how things are getting better are a lie. They're spraying neurotoxins, saying that they're trying to kill out the mosquitoes. And some of these things are like Agent Orange and others that they are now spraying the populace with down there. And it's ridiculous, and people need to know the story about what's happening down the Texas coast. Not only the fact that they're doing this shit, but also the fact these guys, these average bass boat dudes, these people who are down there pulling people out of their houses, they're the real heroes. Don't listen to this bullshit about these government search and rescue missions that are going on, because I didn't see any of that shit. I saw them locking roads down. I saw SWAT going after the civilians who were using their boats to save people, and I saw them locking people in without evacuating them and then flood them in their homes to the point where they needed to be rescued out of there. You ask anybody on the coast what was going on down there, you're going to hear some of the same fucking stories. CNN and Fox News and these other people, they're lying to you about what happened down there. And I'm sure it's going on in Florida at this point in time, especially with the other hurricanes that are coming in. And I've had people ask me, are they manipulating the weather and everything else? I don't fucking know. I know that that ability is there, but what I do know is they're controlling things, and these disaster scenarios that are happening are the very forefront and the front lines of the civil war that's happening in this country right now. There are people out there risking their lives. One of the guys in the Cajun Navy was shot. 2 of the guys went into homes that sell electricity and were electrocuted to death. One person was saving kids and run over by a boat and chopped up. there are rescuers and average people and militia that are being hurt and losing their lives in this. It was a war zone, it continues to be so, and now people like FEMA are bringing in these prison ships. And I'm going to tell you one more time, do not get on their ships, do not go to their FEMA centers. You might not ever be heard from again. And that's direct information from what I saw going on and from my security guys that were on the ground and in these areas and what was happening. There was tens of thousands of lives saved because of these average heroes that went out and risked their lives and did so for their fellow man. And there are those people that are down there who are trying to control, steal, loot, murder, hunt people, and everything else that's going on. I'm going to wrap this up at this point in time because I can't possibly tell 5 days worth of stuff in a 1 hour video, which has now become. I'm just going to ask that you people look into this a little more, because what we warn about over the years, that's exactly how it went down. Until next time, I'm out.